one thing I had forgotten to point out last time, which is how the tile maps work a little bit. So if we go into assets here and we open up um, this tile map, okay, this was one of the levels in your game. Okay, I mean yours maybe didn't look exactly like this, but um, yeah. And actually, I think I just figured out the answer to a question I had last time. So you see how some of the tiles have kind of this pink tinting to them. So the reason for that is the uh, the pink tinting does what to it? Yeah, it makes it a wall, okay, so that you can't walk through it. And if you don't put the little pink tinting on it, then uh, the tile appears, but it doesn't obstruct the player. Okay, so what that allows you to do whose this one is, but um, remember, where is Calvin? Oh, he's in the other class. One of the things that he was, you could just walk on top of it. Huh? Is what is the thing that's detecting whether or not you die? Where it's overlapping. Well, if you're on top of it, but you're not actually overlapping it, then that never gets triggered. Okay, so we can demonstrate. So it's not a wall, and the second one is. So if we go into, well, okay, I think we actually edited the code to fix that problem. Was we made a change to it to take that into account. And the wall tile that you're overlapping is one of the death blocks, or not overlap, then die. The the death block in the Okay, does that make sense? All right. So what this also means then, right, is um, if so this particular tile map is designed for a side scroller kind of play, right? If we were to make a Zelda solid because of you would not want to therefore overlap your space that you are allowed to walk through. Okay. Um, Now, the other thing that this means is, and I'm trying to think if Mario had this. I don't think so, or the original Mario anyway. But there's some There's some games where there's like a wall, but you can actually kind of walk through it and it hides like a secret area, right? You could totally do something like I don't think Mario 1 had any of that mechanic, but huh? Yeah, like Super Mario Brothers, I think pretty surely did. Maybe Mario 3 did. I don't remember. Okay. Um, so that was just one thing I wanted to mention about the tile map situation. The Okay, and that kind of makes sense because what is it doing? It's taking the tile map to generate the mini map. So if there's no tile map, there can be no mini map. Okay, which would allow you to, I guess, just check the art or whatever. You can have a tile map that's like the overworld. My personal favorite Zelda game um, was Link to the Past. Okay, did anybody play that or play a re-release on Wii or a Switch or something? Okay, well, it was one of my probably favorite games as a kid growing up. And one of the reasons that I really liked it and thought it was really clever was um, because, well, let me just see if I can find a, let me just find a scene in it here. Okay, so you see how the art appears kind of, it's green, looks nice, whatever. Well, in this game, you could get, so maybe here's a better example. In this game, you could get an item, and it was a magic mirror. And if you used the magic mirror, it basically took you into an alternate universe that was like this world, and the geometry of it was all basically the same, except it was all dark looking and swampy and evil. Okay, but there would be subtle changes in the level or the world design in both the light world and the dark world, is what they called it. So, for example, let's say that you're walking along and this bridge is destroyed. Okay, well, then you pop into the other world and maybe the bridge is still there. You walk across it, you pop back into the overworld, and now suddenly you can get across the bridge that isn't there, right? So it had this really neat mechanic. And so what that meant is that in some of the dungeons and stuff, like it was almost like playing Portal before Portal, right? Like it really was a clever mechanic. Um, so yeah, but you could do something like that, right? Because what would you do? You'd say, okay, if you hit the magic mirror, then load this sort of alternate tile map in. And then on the subject of that, let me go back into MakeCode. Let's see. You can move the sprites around, but also, let's see, where is it? Scene. Yeah, here it is, tile maps, right? You can move sprites to specific coordinates, not along the screen, but rather along the tile map. Okay, so right, so there's almost actually now two coordinate systems. There's the coordinate system of what's on the screen, where the origin's at the top left, and things work like that. But you can also move things to particular spots along the tile map. Okay. You could also say, okay, let's see, what is a particular tile at a particular location on the tile map? What is to the left, right, up, down, or whatever of my sprite? But this is also kind of cool. This block right here, let me highlight it here on the video. This dude, right? So you know how in the tile map editor we could like highlight or not highlight a block to make it wall or not wall? Well, you can change that in code, right? So you could, this for example could be a way that you could do something like, let's say that there's a locked door, and when you have a key and then touch it, then it makes it not a wall, so you can go through it. Or, for that matter, you could change the art of it from a closed door to an open door looking thing, while also making it walk-throughable. That's now a word.
Ethan, that's what an application of that is like in the tile match. There's like a lever, and you can switch the art when you touch the lever, and then because if you remember in my computer science 101,
yeah,
I did that, and then the door would switch from open or from closed to open.
Yeah. Okay. So like this is how you can do puzzle mechanic-y kind of stuff, because you have the ability, like the tile map is not a completely fixed quantity, right? You have the ability to edit it in game. To something, okay, programmatically. So does that kind of make sense, right? Yeah. So yeah. All right. So good on MakeCode. Let's go over to Omeka briefly. Oops. Okay. So you guys should have gotten. Did everybody get the link? Okay, because I can resend it if needed. Did you not get it?
I got it, but when I tried to join, it said that the link expired.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just try again then. Okay, so what was it? RP?
Yeah, RP
Timber 21. Okay, and you make you admin. Okay, try again. Okay, so there's another page here. So yeah, so if your link says it's expired or you're having other difficulties or whatever, like for some reason it says some of you guys are inactive. I don't know why that is, but whatever, we'll figure it out. Okay, so I've made you guys basically site admins, okay, which means you can, basically speaking, have almost complete control over the site as I do, okay? Now, the reason I had to do that is because later in the semester, when we work on sort of things as groups, if I used a different privilege level, you guys wouldn't be able to edit things made by other people. Well, if there's a page for a group project and you can't edit it because somebody else made it original, like that's not going to work. So I just said, screw it, made you guys all admins. So don't post naughty things or something. Okay, so the way that Omeka works, and we'll see if it, I mean, this is my first time using it for a course, or really at all, is we're going to kind of use this as a digital exhibit of y'all's stuff. Now, the thing that's going to make this a little different, and where Omeka is perhaps not ideal, is we're not just going to document the finished products, okay? If we did that, then this would be perfect, right? But one of the other things we're going to do is sort of document the creative and technical process of making stuff, and that's more like having a blog. Well, Omeka is not precisely designed for that. Okay, so the first thing that you guys are going to do is basically make, and we'll talk the details here, is make a thing talking about either your space shooter game or your platformer. I don't really care, so just pick one, okay? And the way this will work is that each of you will then create an item, okay? Your item would be your, to be associated with your either space shooter or platformer thing that you make, okay? Then, all of the different space shooters go into a collection of all the space shooters, and the platformers into a collection of all the platformers. Or I could put all of them as into a collection of MakeCode game part 1 or something, okay? And then an exhibit would be how I configure it to display all items that I wish out of a given collection or collections, okay? So the metaphor here is it's basically a digital art museum, okay? So if you had an art museum and you had 19th century Impressionist paintings, you had a Picasso collection, and you had 17th century Renaissance paintings, say, okay? Every individual painting that you have is an item, okay? Your Picasso paintings all collectively are a collection of Picasso. You also have other collections, okay? And then the exhibit would be, all right, there's that room in the museum, and you've chosen to put these paintings up on the wall, okay? Maybe it's some of your Picasso, some of your impressionistic stuff, and some of your whatever, right? So you're putting up selected things to exhibit them. Okay, so does that kind of make sense? So the users of this site will see the exhibits and be able then to drill down on an individual item that's displayed within that exhibit. Okay, so if they walk up to Picasso painting, right, then they can be like, oh, kind of sucks not having a meter. Guess that's your story. Somebody explain your story.
Cut off his ear, basically.
Wasn't that damn Yoda?
Yeah.
Good. Just testing you.
Uh,
You
That's why I was
passed.
confused. I thought it was being Yoda.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha. Or Sheldon would put it, bazinga. Right. I actually have a thing in my office. It's like one of those giant red buttons, and if you press it, it goes bazinga. It was a kind of an impulse buy at Walmart one day because same thing with this was a long time ago, but do you guys remember the easy buttons at Staples?
Yeah.
Right? Well, so they were doing these on the commercials for like a year or two, whatever, and it was, you know, really funny. Okay, fine. So, when I was in graduate school, just down the street from my apartment, there was a grocery store, a Staples, and a Walmart. It was great, right? Could basically do any kind of shopping I could, for the most part, need, routine shopping, all in one little spot, and it was just down the street from the apartment. So I go into Staples for, I don't know, printer ink or something, right? And I'm getting to the checkout, and what do I see? Lo and behold, they're selling easy buttons for $5. And I'm like, well, I kind of have to buy one, right? So, yeah. Okay. All right. So, that's basically the idea here. Okay. So if we go into items, okay, currently there are no items. Okay. So let's just make something. Okay. And see what options we have for this. Okay. Is it going to be public or private? Basically, you guys don't need to worry about that, but public would mean that a user can view it. Private would be you're working on it, maybe it's not yet ready to go up on the site. So just leave things private for now. Collection, don't worry about that. I'll add things to the collection later. And then you could give things, right? Okay, so there's going to be a title, a topic of the resource, a description of it, who created it, some sort of source. Not all of these are relevant, obviously. Publisher, for example, that's not going to be relevant. The date or time period associated with it. Yeah, question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, if we upload it as private, does that mean it auto updates when we make changes to the actual web?
the item on here, yes, okay? That's different than MakeCode, obviously, right? So if you put some stuff in and it's set as private, you all can see it because you're site admins, okay? But that content lives in Omeka, not on your computer, right? So if you, let's say, add something and then you go back and change it, it'll reflect whatever change you made. There is only that one object, okay? Now, that said, if you point a link to it, to the MakeCode thing, what was one of the annoying parts about the MakeCode link system? It's not updates, right? So let's say you make something, you give me the link, and then you spend an hour adding all sorts of cool stuff. My link points to what there was before you added all the cool stuff. So you have to have the updated link for it to point to the right thing. Okay, contributor. So this would be, like, in most of these cases, the creator and the contributor are going to be the same person, okay, or same people, right? But, if it's a Picasso painting, Picasso would be the creator, you would be the contributor because you're the one making the thing online. Rights, in our case, right, it's, technically as the creator of the things, it's up to you guys to choose the copyright that's associated with it. Now, I think in an educational kind of environment, I don't bother copyrighting anything that I create. Or if I do, I sort of say it's Creative Commons share alike non-commercial attribute or whatever. Which just means, hey, do whatever you want with it, for non-commercial, non-nefarious purposes, and credit me, right? That's all I want out of it, and that's kind of how academia works, right? So, when I'm teaching calculus or something and I want to find like a good activity on the chain rule, well, I've created some of my own that are pretty cool, but then I also see colleagues that post like, hey, here's this cool video that I made for it. Well, I'm 100% going to use that stuff, right? That's sort of how academia works. A related resource, this would be like, you could say it's related to, I don't know, maybe Picasso made a first draft and second draft painting and we happen to have both of them, I don't know, or a sketch and a painting. Format, what kind of thing is this, right? In our case, it'll all be digital. Language, the language thing actually is kind of interesting because there's really two answers to that question of what language our stuff is in, right? What are the two answers? Oh, come on, guys, wake up. Yeah.
Coding language?
Yeah, your coding language, but also the fact that stuff's in English, I would hope. I mean, it doesn't have to be, right? You can make your game in Spanish if you wanted. Please don't, because I won't be able to grade it. Or rather, you could write like, the professor that assigned us is a total idiot. But if you wrote that in Spanish, I'd be like, actually that I'd probably be able to figure out, but just because French and Spanish are close enough. But yeah, right, so the coding language here, type, identifier, right, so there's a crap ton of stuff in here. Table of contents, that's not going to be relevant. Date created, date accepted, date copyrighted, date submitted, date issued, date modified, right? So a lot of access rights, license, a lot of this is stuff that we're going to skip, okay? And of course, the good thing is that you can always add these things later. References, that might be relevant, and bibliography, not really. Accrual method, how did we get it, right? So a lot of this stuff is completely irrelevant for our purposes, right? It's, but you guys get the idea. Provenance, right? That actually is kind of a relevant thing. Anybody guys see about yesterday's Supreme Court ruling?
What the yield?
Huh?
Not the Yale?
The Yale?
Yeah, they like took the, they dropped the lawsuit against Yale for discrimination.
Oh, that I did not see.
Who's that?
Okay. There's a ruling about art. No? Anybody, well, here, let's just pull it up. I think they'll have this on the front page. Let's see, where was it? Well, it was here. All right, well, let's just Google for it. Yeah, here it is. So basically, somebody was suing Germany in U.S. court over art that had been, that their family had, yeah, well, this case is it's a little more technical than an art theft case, because early on in the Nazi regime, Goering would buy art from people. But buy, right? But now, whether or not there was a gun pointed to your head while you were selling your art, and whether or not you got a fair price for it, was another matter, right? Right. So anyway, they dismissed basically the case, saying that, this is sort of a matter for German court, not U.S. court, right? Because the art that they're arguing over here is in a German museum, right? It's not even in the United States. So, but all of that to say that when you're talking about art assets or artifacts, the thing that is really important is the provenance, okay? Meaning, so let's say, for example, you've got this Picasso painting, right? Original owner obviously was Picasso. He's the one who made the thing. Well, then what?
Someone bought it from
He sells it to somebody, he gives it to somebody, they sell it to somebody else, right? Maybe somebody stole it along the way. I mean, with a lot of art, right, the stealing thing, particularly when you get the World War II involved, right, some stuff has kind of messy provenance, okay? Or other things like, let's say, for example, what's the provenance of, has anybody ever been to the British Museum? Nobody's ever been to England? Oh, man. Huh?
I said I haven't.
Okay, what's one of the most famous things in the British Museum? It's on the ground floor. The Rosetta Stone.
Oh, okay.
Well, yes, I mean, there's plenty of other things too. Right, okay, so what's the provenance of the Rosetta Stone? Well, it was Egyptian, right? New Kingdom or whatever it was, Ptolemaic era, right? And then in the 19th century, the British dug it up and carted it and a lot of other cool stuff off to England. And now it sits in the British Museum, right? So it's kind of a touchy subject, right, between them and the Egyptian government as to who owns this thing. Yeah, okay, anyway. So, yeah, like I said, a lot of this is not going to be at all relevant for us, right, because the provenance of your video games, whatever. Okay, so title, subject, description, that's the kind of stuff. So let's just say example, game project, video games, and description. This is an example item, Dr. McKinney and Co. Okay, so let's just say we'll add the item. Okay, and then if we go to edit it, right, the same thing, right? So what else can we put in here? We can put files associated with it, so that would be like a picture. We can actually associate a map to it, so like where was it created, and obviously in our case it's all Crawfordsville. Tags, which we don't necessarily need to mess with, item relations and item metadata. But like, for example, a hyperlink, right? I could say, all right, I'm going to point, let me just copy Calvin's link here to that. Okay, and then we can see how would this look from sort of a public view. Okay, example game project. Right now it doesn't really have anything, but I could put a picture there, etc. Okay. All right, so does that kind of make sense? So some of this we're just going to have to tinker with it and kind of figure out, all right, what's the best practice for us using it to make it look good, etc. Okay. Okay, does that make sense? Right? And then if we did something like browse items, we could see there was this project, and maybe there's other projects, okay, and so on. Okay, so you guys kind of get the idea? Yeah? And like I said, at first this will just be kind of to play with, okay? All right, now if I go back to editing mode, right, then I can make a collection of, and I can call this collection something like MakeCode Games Collection. Okay, and then I should be able to add, I guess I do it on the item level. Okay, so on the item level, let me go into my project, and I'll edit this and say, this is a member of the MakeCode Game Collection. Okay, now it's a part of my collection. Okay, by the way, the item types that you can have, right, are, right now we have a hyperlink item, but there's lots of other things that you can have, right, websites, whatever. All right, and then let's see, where was exhibits? Okay, so I could add an exhibit, and I could say this is going to be MakeCode Game Exhibit. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And then within that, I would add pages. Okay, so like, let's say maybe I use the gallery one. Okay, and then this block is sort of a grid, and I could say, okay, select this item, test item, apply. Okay, and then obviously I could keep doing these. Oh, so the page title is MakeCode exhibit stuff. Okay, and then if we wanted to view what it would look like as public, right, here would be, you know, so this would be like a grid of things, and I could have one for each of the projects. And then if you click on it, then it would drill down to the individual things. Okay, but you notice that the item, the pages that I could make there for the exhibit, right, I had the option to have text in there too, or just a grid of things or whatever. And yeah. Actually, I think what I need to do is link you guys to what a finished product can look like, and then I think you guys will maybe get the idea a little better. Okay, good? All right, so for the rest of the time today, what I wanted to talk about is basically the next step on our game adventure, because I think you guys are ready to kind of be turned loose to make stuff, okay? And so what I kind of wanted to do was to, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time, was to get a sense for what types of things are you guys interested in making to sort of set the parameters for the first big project. Okay, so what are you guys interested in making? I think last time we definitely mentioned JRPGs, so this would be like Zelda, Final Fantasy, Pokemon, games like that. Okay, if you did something like Pokemon or Final Fantasy, right? So tell me how those games work. And Pokemon specifically, right? I think you guys all did everybody play Pokemon when you were kids? Raise your hand if you never have played Pokemon. Okay, well, why don't you guys not pick Pokemon then? How about that, right? Unless you want to make fun of it, right? So you guys could do Chin Pokemon or whatever it was from South Park, right? Gotta catch them all, right? Okay, so how did Pokemon work? Yeah.
It was a turn-based combat system, so like one person would attack and then the other person would attack, like in sequence, I guess.
Okay, but there was also
Kind of a top-down
but then you would get into a battle and it would go into this turn-based kind of thing, right? So there was sort of an overworld where you'd be walking around and there'd maybe be character dialogue and whatever, right? But then there was also the battle mode, right? Okay, so Final Fantasy very much the same way, right? There'd be an overworld, you'd walk around, you'd have a party of characters. I'm thinking the original, well, okay, I should say. When I say the original Final Fantasy, did any of you guys play this, the old 8-bit Nintendo version? Okay. Which one is that actually in the Japanese counting system?
The first Final Fantasy?
Yeah. The first American Final Fantasy was actually the third Japanese Final Fantasy.
The only one I played was Final Fantasy 6.
Japanese 6 or American 6?
American 6.
Okay.
What are they up to?
Oh, God. Yes, I don't know.
Pretty sure it's 15. I thought I heard something about them playing at 16.
Wouldn't shock me. I'm not sure if at this point if everything is reverted to the Japanese numbering sequence or if it's, yeah, because there were more Final Fantasy games in Japan that weren't released in the United States, hence the numbering's all screwed up. So like what I played, probably one of the best of the series was Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo. That was actually Final Fantasy VI in Japan. So anyway. Okay, but Final Fantasy worked very much the same way. There was an overworld, you would walk around and explore, you know, there'd be dungeons, and then at random, like if you were in a dungeon, you would get popped into a battle, and then at that point it was sort of this turn-based kind of battle system, okay? Zelda, little different because the battle, what was the combat like there? It wasn't turn-based, and you never left the map mode to do it, right? So you could swing your sword as you were walking around, and if there was an enemy, you would do that, right? Okay, so, or you'd swing your sword, and if the sword touched an enemy, or the sword sprite overlapped an enemy, then what would happen to the enemy? It would either die or lose health or whatever, right? And then there were stuff like the little bushes that were, do you guys remember when I had the Zelda up? If you swung your sword, you could cut them down, and every now and then it would spawn a coin or a rupee in that game, but, right, okay. So, all of those things would be great. Now, obviously, you're not going to make an entire Zelda game, right? That'd be a little ridiculous for the sake of this project, but, yeah, okay. So, what other things would be kind of on the menu? Yeah.
Have some simple multiplayer. Like,
Okay, simple multiplayer. That we'll talk about. I think I'm going to keep that one off the list because it'll be a little too simple, right? Yeah. Fighting game. Okay, so fighting game. What's our examples for those? Street Fighter, Smash, see, I spelled it correctly. Okay. Okay, so yeah, Street Fighter, Smash Brothers, Mortal Kombat. Okay, there's going to be a little bit more tricky in terms of the multiplayer, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of digging there. I did find the keyboard mapping, so that the multiplayer, the keyboard mapping for the buttons is if you've got two players, then the arrow keys for one player are WASD, right? Yeah, and then I think it's like Q and E or something like that is the A and the B buttons. So it's basically one player gets one part of the keyboard, the other gets the other. I'm going to look into if there's like controller support and maybe grab a couple of controllers so that we can, do this properly. But make sense? Okay. Particularly with the Mortal Kombat or Smash Bros or something like that, right? Doing those with an AI is a lot different than doing them with a second player. Okay. The other thing you'd have to do there would be in all three of those games, right? There's more than one different character that you can play. So the very first thing you would have to worry about is a character select system of some sort. And then each character would need to have differences, both in art and possibly in moves. I think if you want to go down that road, the first thing to do would be to figure out, I think, a button combo extension to kind of do some experimental stuff. Okay. Okay. What else? That gets the fighting game. Other ideas? Yeah.
Sports game.
Sports game. Okay. And so, what's kind of our prototypes for that? Well, okay, yeah, but
NBA Jam.
okay, yes.
I don't know if you know the name of it, but it was a sports game where it was really simple and like you could either choose to run the ball or you could choose to pass. And you like dive into using the keys, running back. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not know that. Okay. I didn't play many of the sports games. Let's just say they were not on my lists to Santa Claus when I was a little kid. They were on my friend Josh, who lived 3 doors down. So he got all the button mashers and the sports games, and they would annihilate me in all of those. And then I'd play the JRPGs for hours, and we'd be like, let's go throw the football or something. So, other thoughts? Yeah, okay.
Like a puzzle game.
Okay. Puzzle games. So, like, what sort of puzzles are you thinking?
I remember one Flappy Bird.
Flappy.
But,
I would not call that a puzzle game. All right, so Flappy Bird, yeah,
This doesn't go to puzzle game,
that's
that's okay.
fine.
Like a racing game.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Think of like, I don't know if you guys ever played the RC Pro Am on Game Boy.
This is one that I remember.
something.
Pole position, this one was great. No? Did you guys ever? Okay, let me pull up a YouTube video. This was an awesome one. Now, this one was interesting because, from a technical standpoint, because what happened? There it goes. Okay. This one was interesting from a technical standpoint because it had to fake 3D, right? So there were 2 different cars you could drive, right? And then it would show you like sort of the overmap of what the thing looks like. And you guys can't hear the audio, but there was some really classic, da 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 da, while your motor is going, right? Yeah, so this was a Nintendo game, right? And yet it had sort of this rudimentary faking 3D graphics, right? That would be the very first thing to figure out how the heck to do something like this, okay? Well, if you were going to do it sort of from perspective like this, you could clearly do a top-down racer, okay? Right, MakeCode would definitely be okay for that. But to try and do something like this would be, kind of, I'm not sure how you would actually do this, this sort of fake 3D effect. Yeah, and there were some games in the arcades, right? Like, did you guys ever go to video arcades? Yeah. Back in the day, some games that were sort of like this that actually had a shifting, like there was a lever that you could be in low or high gear. And then, of course, they got more advanced. So nowadays, if you go to an arcade, well, all right, if you went to an arcade a year ago today, right, where they might have like the full gear shift and gas pedal and brake pedal and heck, maybe even a clutch. Do you guys know how to drive a manual? Yeah, I can't. So anyway, so yeah, this was a pretty cool game. And then you had these enemies, and whoever's playing this is pretty good. Now you see how the sprites are kind of wigging out a little bit there. Yeah, some of these were like graphics bugs and things that, because of how they were using the old school Nintendo. So, and this may actually be running in an emulator, not on live hardware, and it's, things never work the same. So, anyway. All right, you guys get the idea? All right, let's go back to our list. There was, yeah.
A platformer like Contra or Mario.
Okay, yeah. So there's a term for these.
That's good, yeah.
Okay, we have done platformers, right? Now we haven't done a whole lot with the platformer. Okay, but let's think about Mario, right? If we wanted to make Mario or a Mario style game, we started it, right? We know how to do the tile map. We know how to do maybe a simple enemy. We've got the idea for how to do coin blocks and stuff. But the actual Mario game was far more complicated than that, right? Because what was there? What have we not even begun to touch? Huh? Worlds? Okay, I mean, we've got different levels, but that's, like our tile maps were very small. The tile maps for a Mario world were much bigger. And of course, you could make a bigger tile map, right? What else? Checkpoints, the pipes, right? So in original Mario, right, you go down that pipe and then you're in the little underground area and then you can go back out, right? And then you rejoin the main area, right? So that is sort of like sub-worlds, if you will. The flag thing at the end of the level, right? Coins, mushrooms, fire flowers, right? So if you're going to do a platformer, right, we're going to have to do a lot of, like, seriously sprucing up what we've already got, okay? And for that matter, some platformers actually did have an overworld, right? So Mario World on the Super Nintendo, or even Mario 3 for the regular Nintendo, had kind of an overworld, and then you would choose a map to play, and then you'd play it, and they were kind of sequenced in such a way that you could, you could sort of avoid some things, but not all of it, right? You had to eventually go through everything. Yeah. Okay. What else? Yes.
I guess it's kind of like a platformer like Mario, but a side scroller like Cuphead or Fairy.
Okay. Yeah. Cuphead I've never played.
Yeah, it's fun, but Fairy.
What was the other one? Starbound.
Terraria would also count as a sandbox game.
Yes. Okay. So now sandbox games, that's going to be a little tricky because you would have to have some sort of mechanic to like gather resources, right? Which would potentially involve destroying a tile on a tile map or replacing it. So like, let's say there's a tree and you chop the tree. Well, then where the tree was, you have to replace with sort of like a tree stump or something, right? And then have like an inventory system where you would say, okay, I'm going to add one to my tree count variable or whatever, right? And then have some sort of crafting mechanic, right? Because I don't know about Cuphead, but Terraria and Starbound definitely have crafting mechanics, sort of like Minecraft, right? Where you get resources, you put them together, you can turn them into a different item, and eventually build all kinds of stuff. I suppose it would theoretically be possible to do like in Terraria or Starbound, where if you can modify what's on the tile map, right, then conceivably you could like build an item you could build a tile map in the game yourself, right, under player control. Might be kind of weird, but I guess you could do it. Yeah, what else? Okay. Well, we got a lot of ideas here, okay? And I want to maybe kind of leave this open to you guys, which one you want to do. So the first sort of thing to do would be to pick something, okay, and then think about what are the problems that I'm going to need to be able to solve, right? So if, for example, I pick the fighting game, well, the first thing you're going to have to do is figure out what am I able to do with this button combo mod, okay?
what is it able to do, what limitations do I have, how do I implement that, okay? And make an experimental thing where it's basically just like a tile map of almost nothing, and where like it makes this sound if you do one button combo and that sound if you do another, right? Just something real simple for testing, and just try it out and experiment with it. See how it's gonna work, okay? And then once you kind of figure out those mechanics, then you can start to build something bigger around it, okay? Same thing with the, Zelda game, like the puzzle stuff, right? We've kind of talked about, okay, if I wanted to make something where there was like a key and a door, then how I could like change the tile on the tile map for the door from a closed to open one, and then also change whether or not that tile, that block was a wall or not, right? Well, we talked about it, but that's a different matter than doing it, right? So make something simple, just quick and dirty to test it. Okay. Right, so that'll be, I guess, basically the first part of this assignment is to sort of say, okay, what are you thinking? What issues or what things are you gonna have to figure out how to do, and then start figuring them out. Okay, yeah.
To be clear, are we starting fresh?
Yes. Okay, now that said, if you're gonna do the platformer or the space shooter, right, you do have some start to that, okay? And it's not like you can't reuse that stuff. But, for some of these, you are 100% starting fresh, like Zelda.
Or the sports game?
Right, exactly, like there's nothing to, there. The side scroller that we made, the platformer, to some extent, I guess, kind of like the idea of movement on it and the tile map, right? Because in like a sports game, I suspect that, like let's say you do a football game, right? Where most of the old 8-bit football games, you were looking sort of top down on the football field, and or some part of it. So your tile map would be like the field, right? And then you would have to do stuff like, you'd have to figure out a down system, right? You'd have to figure out where to, how to do the 10-yard thing.
Pretty much just play around with it.
Yeah, it's totally doable, right? I think, right? Because what you'd have to say is, okay, my sprite is at this position with the ball, okay, and what is its x coordinate? And then, depending on which side of the field you're on, right, are you going from left to right or right to left? Okay, well, that depends. But then, like, okay, where is the well, there's the line of scrimmage, whatever line it's on, but what's the first down line called? Like, where you have to get the first down?
Yards marker?
That thing, yes, wherever that is. But you would store that as a variable, right, numerically. And then also have to graph, like, where is it, by putting like a big stripe on the tile map or so, I don't know, right? Yeah, so how you would do passing, that's completely, that's gonna be definitely experimenting. Running the ball, probably not too hard, but in a sense, right, you snap and pass to a runner, that's gonna be a non-trivial, right? That's gonna take some work to figure out how to implement. All right, so we kind of got the idea what to do, yeah?
Is this like a bigger project for the semester, or is this just for like?
For now. Oh, honey.
Yeah.
Oh, honey. Yeah, no, we'll work on this for the next week or two, basically. Yeah, so no, I'm being facetious here, but that is a fair question. In the sense of, like, if I were to make a Zelda game, and you told me I had all semester to do it, then I'm gonna have a massive world and craft tons of dungeons and all sorts of items and enemies and what, right? If you tell me it's due next week, well, that's another matter, right? So the scope of these things is not an entire semester scope. It's a few weeks scope, okay? Because then we're gonna, get into Unreal Engine and stuff like that. Okay, so, right. All right, so let's, I guess, go ahead and quit the stream a little early, but essentially the two things that you guys need to work on for, and I'll post this stuff to Canvas so we're all on the same page, is how to, like, what do you want to work on? What issues do you have? Start kind of doing experimental work to figure out how you're going to do specific mechanics, okay? And tell me, you know, what's your idea? What are you going to work on? And then the second would be to do sort of this first thing with Omeka to make an item with some content from your either platformer or side scroller, just sort of as an example, okay? Just sort of get used to Omeka. Okay, make sense? So, next week what we'll do collectively is, so I mentioned puzzle game here. As a class, basically what I would like for us to do on, say, Tuesday is to work on a tic-tac-toe game. Okay, that sort of will be separate from the project thing. That'll be kind of we'll work on it together to talk about the different issues that we would need to implement. One of the reasons that I've picked tic-tac-toe is it's not particularly complicated in terms of the rule structure, but we'll have to figure out how to implement certain things. The other reason is that when we get into Unreal Engine, we're going to then do the exact same thing. Okay, how would we make tic-tac-toe here? What can we recycle from before? What do we have to re-implement, etc.? What differences do we have in terms of the interface? In Unreal Engine, you got a mouse. You don't have a mouse in MakeCode, right? Well, that changes things. Okay. Right. So that's kind of where we're going to be for a while. Yuji? All right. Sweet. Let me kill the stream.